Today, we've got a pretty wild revenge story about a roommate's friendship vacation being totally ruined. We'll get into that in a bit, but first, my fat-phobic parents sent me out of their home in my teenage years. I decided to get my revenge however I possibly could. My fat-phobic parents apparently could not bear to have me in their home anymore once I clocked the age of 17, and so they thought it only fit to cut off all ties with me. I thought of this as my central motivation and decided that very day to make them regret their actions. I, male, 23, wasn't always as aesthetically pleasing to look at as I am now. In fact, growing up, my parents were always very verbal about how they felt about my weight growing up, which was that they obviously did not like how I looked at the time and all. It was not out of my control at the very beginning when I was still an adolescent. However, when puberty hit, it got out of my control, and I was beginning to change very rapidly at the time. Before long, I knew that I was weighing over what could be called healthy, or even fat. I was at this time nearing my obese form. There was nothing I could do. I was struggling with my life on a daily basis. Minor tasks that I could easily do before were now seeming impossible. And to add on top of that, the bullying in school was nothing to write home about. I mean, what were you expecting? I was a literal walking lump of meat. I couldn't do anything even if I wanted to. The bullying went on for a while before my parents found out, after they were invited to my high school by the principal, and they had no other choice but to withdraw me and homeschool me. That fateful day was the very first day that I saw the look of disdain in their eyes for the very first time. My mother had this very hateful look in her eyes, while my father, on the other hand, was even worse. He started looking at me with a look of disgust, and this made me hate myself and question my life. Mind you, at the time, I was just 17. Now, fast forward about a whole year. I was just finishing my homeschool curriculum under the tutelage of my mother and several other instructors who were hired by my father for the obvious reason of teaching his disgustingly obese son. After a whole year had gone by, one would think that their view and the way they looked at me would have changed. Or better still, they would have actually taken measures to make sure that I lose all the weight that I had unexpectedly gained. But this wasn't the case. In fact, about a few months after I'd completed my homeschooling, I was actually planning on my own to embark on a very strict weight loss journey. And the one thing I know for a fact was that had I gotten the support from my family at the time, things would have definitely turned out way different than it did. Anyways, my parents decided at the time, just as I was starting a life-changing journey, that they no longer wanted me in their house, and that if I wanted to live in their home with them, it would only be on the condition that I would start contributing financially to the monthly upkeep of their home in the form of bills, groceries, and the likes. And their reason for this was that seeing as I was always home, I should be paying for the services I was using. Now, there was no problem with this at the time. The only issue was that I obviously couldn't work, hence I couldn't earn money, and hence I couldn't pay them. And even after countless arguments, they still stood their ground, and eventually I was kicked out of my own parents' home with nowhere to go, nobody to offer a helping hand, and worst of all, it was physically impossible for me to even walk a short distance without running out of breath. It was really a crazy point in my life, and it's one I promised myself that I would never forget, as it was that point or moment in my life that I was seriously able to discover myself. Now, at this time, I was still in erratic contact with my mother, as she claimed that she couldn't help but worry about me. My father, on the other hand, made it very clear that he never wanted to lay his eyes on me again. He had effectively disowned me. My mother was still trying her best to make me understand that this was simply because of the way things had played out, and that it wasn't anything like my father was making it out to be. I was hurt, sad, depressed, and worst of all, I was alone. There was literally no one in my corner, and this was when I realized the truth about life, which was that as a man, when you're at your all-time lowest, there's an unbelievably high chance that you're going to go through that phase of your life all alone. With nothing to my name, I decided to do anything and everything possible to lose weight firstly, as this would effectively solve the majority of my problems. I was temporarily living a nomadic life, basically moving from place to place each night, all while struggling to keep up with exercising on an empty stomach. Because I basically had nothing to my name, this routine of mine went on for give or take 8 months after my parents had kicked me out of their home. and at the time, it was about 7 months since I had last heard from my mother, because I had to pawn off my phone just to be able to survive for a bit at the time. Because it wasn't easy. After the 8 months had passed quickly, I had lost a considerable amount of weight, and I was basically a shadow of my former self. Now I had gotten to where I wanted to be, but I was still a work in progress. Now, it was at this time that it became possible for me to physically have a job. I couldn't go to any eatery or restaurant, as this would simply be me signing myself up for a whole regression, basically back to where I was coming from, weight-wise. And so the only place that came to mind at the time that would offer me a stable source of income, as well as help, or rather assist in me reaching my weight goals, was none other than the gym. It was hard, summoning the courage to walk up to the manager of the gym and try to get a job, as I was always turned down at the entrance of the gym by the receptionist. However, I didn't give up. I was persistent, and I guess you could say that this proved fruitful at the very end. We spoke at length one night, while I had waited the whole day outside of the gym, and this was the moment that really changed it all for me. He offered me a job in his gymnasium, and effectively providing me with a place to stay and a roof over my head. He also provided me with a job, as according to him, he was looking to employ someone that would tend to the equipment at the end of each day, just to make sure they were in peak condition before reopening the next day. I accepted each and every role that was given to me at the time, as this was quite literally the only choice I had, and I'll be damned if I fumble this golden opportunity. Fast forward 2 years later, I could proudly say that I was effectively a shadow of the young boy I was a few years back, and even my boss, the gym manager, could testify to this. I was already well chiseled, and my proportions were exactly how I had been envisioning them to be. This was the result of my hard work and consistency over the last 2 years. It was at this time that my life would ultimately change for the better, all without me realizing what was to come. Now, it was a usual day at the gym. I opened up, carried out maintenance on all the equipment, and when we got a new member, walk in. Let's call this member Brett. Now, Brett was a new member, and I could tell, because he knew literally nothing about the gym and the equipments, and also because I was friends with every other guy or girl that came to the gym on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, and he wasn't one of them. Now, Brett was a bit different from me, quite the opposite in fact. He was skinny, real skinny, and this was something he was looking to change. We talked for a bit, and I basically gave him some advice on what to do, seeing as he needed the help. With my 2 years of experience working in the gym, I advised him on what to eat and do in order to bulk up a bit before he could start working on his body in the gym. And after that day, we kept in contact. I was basically checking in with Brett, monitoring his progress every day, which eventually turned into weeks and then months. Before I knew it, Brett had been on his weight gain journey for 6 whole months. I was happy with his progress, and so was Brett. It was at this time that things took a surprising twist. Apparently, Brett saw the act of me helping him as me offering him my services. And so, before deciding to bid the public gym goodbye, he decided it was only right to pay for the services I'd rendered him. And so he got my account information from the manager and made a large deposit of about a few $1,000,000. I was practically speechless. I immediately contacted him when I found out what he had done, and his reason for doing that was very simple. According to him, he had hired several other dietitians and private gym instructors, all of which proved ineffective after an entire year of spending millions. And after he saw that I had achieved what a few others had failed to achieve in months, he only thought it right to give to me what he wasted on them for the entire year. I was confused. I literally had no words. But all in all, I was really grateful for this miracle that had just happened to me. This just seemed like a second chance at making a name for myself, and I was not going to squander this opportunity that had presented itself to me. I decided to use all of the money that I got from Brett to establish my very own gym, and also sell my services to people that really needed my services. And with Brett's help, this was possible, seeing as he was a high-income individual and so were most of his friends. In less than a year, I had established myself as a full-time private instructor, and also owner of a very large and functional gymnasium that would be open 24/7. And I had basically tripled the amount that I had gotten from Brett some months back, in under a year. I was at this point in my life, fulfilled, but there was still something that was missing, as I was left feeling quite uneasy for weeks, until it came to me. My parents. They were the reason I was where I was today, and I thought it was only right that I return the favor. And so I sought them after almost 6 long years. To my greatest surprise, they were on the verge of selling the house they were so proud of a few years back. And this was because my parents had literally nothing to their name again, after falling victim to some online scam of sorts. I didn't go to them immediately though. I contacted my assistant to purchase the home on my behalf. All of the processes were seamless and smooth, and on the day they were supposed to move out, I made my appearance. My mother was especially shocked to see me. My father, not so much. I wasn't receptive at all. I simply told them why I was there in the first place, which was to purchase the house and to let them know that it was my house now and that I was allowing them to stay there. I could tell that both my parents were on the verge of crashing out, but there was nothing they could have done about it. I simply walked out on them, and after that encounter, I had this sense of relief, or feeling that I had accomplished something that I had long wanted to, although it didn't feel as satisfying as I hoped it would. I put my job on the line for a friend I trusted. Our next story is, I once had a job in one of the most prominent banks in my state, and everyone who knew me wondered how I managed to secure such a great opportunity. The bank had a reputation for being selective. One could send tons of emails and cover letters and still get ghosted. It was almost hilarious, the way they silently ignored applicants who didn't meet their high standards. I'd heard countless stories about people giving up after a few rejections, but that wasn't me. I'm different. I'm dogged, determined, and luckily quite smart. I wanted a banking job so badly that I resolved not to take no for an answer, no matter how often I might be rejected. Luckily for me, I bagged the job on my very first attempt. It felt like destiny. I remember the look on my family's faces when I told them. They were so proud, and I was ecstatic to start what I thought would be a dream job. Of course, it was my dream job, so when I resumed with an intense desire to rise to the zenith of my career. But I was shocked at the reception I got on the job. Even though I hadn't expected a smooth sail, I wasn't prepared for the whirlwind experience the banking job posed to me. The job was fast-paced, challenging, and rewarding. I threw myself into it wholeheartedly, learning everything I could and excelling in my role. My coworkers often marveled at my dedication and enthusiasm. "How did you even get this job on your first try?" they'd ask. I'd laugh it off, but deep down, I knew it was because I had refused to let fear or doubt stop me. If you think I was blessed, you're not wrong. As someone who's willing to learn and could be trusted to deliver, I quickly earned a good reputation, which brought me closer to opportunities within the organization. But my happiness was short-lived, as I delved into a terrible mistake just because I wouldn't stop seeing myself as everyone's savior. It started when I made a decision that, in hindsight, I probably shouldn't have. Even though I had no business with the department responsible for sourcing guarantors at my workplace, I stuck my neck out for a friend who desperately needed help. Before you blame me, just know that it wasn't my fault. My friend, F, had also held my hand during the darkest period of my life. We were in our last year in college when my dad tragically passed away. It was a pain I would never be prepared for. Everything became blank to me. I skipped classes and I forgot to turn in my assignments. Nothing in the world made sense to me at that point, so showing up at school was the last thing on my mind. I was a daddy's girl through and through, and F knew about it. She was there when my dad drove me in on my first day of college. She was there through every surprise visit and all the free groceries I enjoyed as a bonus to the visit. She was there when I had my first heartbreak from a boy I fell in love with at first sight. At my lowest, I was thankful that F saw me when no one else did. She saw that I was drowning and she decided to save me. When she noticed I wasn't showing up to my classes, she made some of our course mates join her to show up at my house every single morning to drag me out of bed just so I didn't continue to skip classes. Her kindness didn't end there. She also stayed up with me late at night, helping me catch up on missed assignments. She even took it upon herself to explain topics I had missed. Without her, I doubt I would have graduated when I did. F became more than just a friend. She was like a sister I never had. After we graduated college, we continued to grow stronger in our friendship. She was one of the people who encouraged me to go for my banking job since that was my dream job. It was easy for me to give a listening ear when she approached me with her plea for help. I didn't think twice. She was in dire straits and I couldn't bear to see her struggle. She needed someone to stand as her guarantor for a loan, and though it was against the bank's policy for employees to act as guarantors for personal loans, I couldn't say no. I knew it was my time to hold her hand in her downtime. I reasoned that I owed her so much for the sacrifices she made for me in college. Besides, she assured me that there would be no cause for alarm. I knew that my friend had a habit of owing people and not paying back, but I gave an excuse for her with the belief that she knew that banks are different from close friends and associates. I managed to speak to some of my friends in the loan department, and in no time, my F got the help she desperately needed, even though I was given professional advice not to stand as a guarantor because it was a delicate thing to do. I managed to convince my friends in that department that the person in need was like a family member to me. Besides, at that point, I didn't think anything would go wrong because I knew she had a job with which she could easily pay off her loans. The loan would also be paid off in 7 months, so everything would work out just fine before anyone found out what I had done. The first loan payment was seamless. The money was deducted without any hassle or excuse. Of course, not that I expected any hassle anyway. The second loan repayment was also as it should be. No complaints, no excuses, just perfect as expected. The same thing was expected for the third month, except that there was an unexpected hassle that month. There was an emergency call from F someday before the due date, during which she informed me that she had lost her job. I was stunned. My mind raced with the implications of her words. "But don't worry," she said, her voice attempting reassurance. "I'll figure something out." I wanted to believe her, but deep down, a sense of dread began to settle in. A few weeks passed, and then F called again. This time, her tone was different, more desperate. "I need your help," she said. "You know I'm struggling right now, and the bank is already on my neck for the next installment. I'm so sorry, but could you help me cover the payment this month?" I hesitated, but she pressed on, reminding me of all the time she had been there for me. My resolve weakened, and I agreed, thinking it would be a one-time favor. But the following month, the same request came again. This time, she suggested something that left me speechless. "Why don't you just pay the amount into my account every month until I can get back on my feet?" she proposed. I had to ask her to reiterate herself as I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "It's just for a little while," she added when she sensed my hesitation. It was a big deal for me then because I was just trying to find my feet. I just got my confirmation letter on the job and my salary just got increased. Still, it was a big decision for me to make because, on one hand, this was F, the person who had saved me during one of the darkest periods of my life. On the other hand, I knew I was risking not just my financial stability, but my ability to pay my bills. I wanted to help her, but I also couldn't ignore the growing unease in my gut. What had I gotten myself into? Reluctantly, I agreed to pay for her third installment, hoping it would buy her enough time to figure things out. The fourth month came, and she called again with the same plea. This time, her tone was more assertive, almost entitled. "You know I'm going through a tough time. I can't believe you'd even hesitate to help me after all I've done for you." That stung. I agreed to cover the fourth installment, but I made it clear that it would be the last time. I couldn't keep jeopardizing my finances for a loan that wasn't mine. By the fifth month, I had reached my limit. When she called again, I refused. "I can't keep doing this, F. You need to figure out another situation," I told her firmly. I also reminded her that I stood for her when it wasn't convenient just for old time's sake. That was not the agreement we both had regarding the loan, but her response shocked me. After that altercation between us, she became cold, and she accused me of abandoning her when she needed me most. She stopped answering my calls and began avoiding me altogether. I was heartbroken, but I also knew I had gotten it all to my neck. I decided I would not pay another dime. If the bank discovered I had acted as a guarantor, so be it. I was done covering for her. At that point, things had gotten bad at work. The bank's recovery team began calling me incessantly. I'd return home from work, drained and defeated, only to face a barrage of calls demanding explanations. It didn't matter to them that I wasn't the one who took the loan. I had signed my name on the dotted line, and that was all they needed. Some of my colleagues who had advised me started to laugh at me when they noticed my frequent trips to the recovery office. Whispers spread quickly. It was overwhelming. This entire ordeal took me back to the time I landed my job at the bank. It had been one of the proudest moments of my life. I had always wanted to work in a bank, and not just any bank. I wanted to work in one of the most prestigious financial institutions in my state, and it wasn't easy to get in. There I was, wondering what was going to happen to everything I had worked hard to get. I knew my job was hanging by a thread, and every time I passed my supervisor's office, I could feel my heart pounding hard. I feared being called in to explain myself. I knew that standing as a guarantor had violated company policy, and if the higher-ups decided to take disciplinary action, I could lose everything I worked so hard to build. But I was resolute because I had made up my mind to deal with F. I informed the loan department that the borrower was defaulting and that I wouldn't be covering the repayments. They reminded me that as the guarantor, I was legally obligated to cover the defaulted payments. I didn't care. Do what you must, I told them. I'm not paying. I didn't know what F was trying to do, but I could tell that she knew what I was doing. I could feel that she wanted me to lose my job because nothing else could explain why she was making me suffer that much. To prolong the process, I deliberately delayed making any definitive moves toward clearing the debt. I knew this would stretch the time frame, making it inevitable that F would be blacklisted. At this point, I didn't care about the job anymore. It felt like everything I had worked for was already slipping through my fingers, so why not ensure she learned her lesson? Every time the loan department reached out to me, I feigned confusion or claimed to need more time to review the options. In reality, I had no intention of making the payment, nor was I still interested in encouraging F to pay. The more time passed, the closer F got to being officially marked as a high-risk debtor. If she could take advantage of my kindness, she needed to experience the full consequences of her actions. Well, it played out as I had imagined. Even though I got reprimanded for violating one of the policies at work, my friend, on the other hand, was blacklisted. This story wasn't just about revenge, it was justice well served. Our next story is, I ruined my roommate's friendship vacation. I was very excited when I got accepted into the college of my choice, but I was also super bummed to find out that my best friend didn't get accepted. She met all the requirements, but they just weren't impressed. She got accepted into her second choice uni though, and was grateful for that. I was happy for my bestie, but I wasn't happy about us not being together. We made promises to visit regularly and find a way to do nearly all the things we used to do. I knew in my mind that our promises may not be very feasible. My mom told me that it was very hard to maintain long-distance relationships of any kind. We were both going to meet different people and have different experiences, and we'd try to adjust. The new adjustment might cost us our responsibilities, and we may grow into two different people, and that would inevitably affect our friendship. That broke my heart. Even though we both made grand promises to each other before leaving, I prepared myself for what may be the inevitable, the end of our friendship. As we drove to campus, my mom told me different stories to make me feel better about being apart from my best friend. She said my best friend may indeed meet someone new, but I too will meet new people and may even prefer them and their company to my best friends. She also said that if we had both gotten accepted into the same university, it was still possible to be with each other and outgrow each other. I started to dream about an even more colorful life than the one I had in high school. I was quite nerdy, loved the arts, and loved reading. I knew I'd make new friends and join clubs that had people like me, so I looked forward to it. All the joy I had disappeared when I settled into my dorm and met my roommate. When my mom and I came in, her stuff was already on her side of the room, but she wasn't in the room. My mom saw a pile of books on her table, recognized them, and mentioned that my roommate and I would get along since we both read the same books. When she came in the next evening, I said hello and introduced myself to her. She said hello back. I asked if she liked reading, pointing to the books on her desk. For a while, we talked about reading, and then she invited me to a small book club she was in. When we got to the dormitory's parking lot, she asked if I had a car. I pointed at my car. It was quite pricey and was a gift from my dad and his twin brother when I got accepted into college. She was impressed and said we should go in my car instead, and then she offered to drive us. I didn't care about that or find it weird that she wanted to drive. My brothers and best friend all took my car for a spin when it was given to me, so I understood her wanting to feel what it was like to drive a cool car. I was flattered that she felt comfortable with me. She pointed at her car, and she said she was tired of driving in it, and said something about her parents promising to buy her a new car the next month. Something about the way she said it just sounded like she was lying, but I didn't care. We got to the club. It was really just a group of friends who claimed to love to read. After having a conversation with the group, I decided that I didn't like them. They were just too shallow, and it felt as though each of them was trying to one-up the other. They also talked less about books and more about how other people who didn't read were ridiculous. There was also lots of gossip. I found out on the drive back to the dorm that they all knew one another before college. When we got to the room, my roommate asked if I was trying to look better than her at the meeting. I was confused. She then said she thought I was trying to look better and wanted to clear things up. I just knew at that moment that my roommate and I would not get along. She never invited me to her club meetings again, and I never offered to accompany her. She would ask to borrow my car whenever she was going out, and then give me her car keys in case I needed to go somewhere with my car. At some point, asking for my car felt like I was the one borrowing the car, so I told her I wasn't comfortable with how she almost completely stopped driving her car since we met. She didn't say anything, but she returned my car keys and never asked for them again. Ever since that happened, she started to pick on me. She would mock me when her book club friends were around, say crappy things about me to my face, and try to provoke me. I always ignored her. I knew she was throwing a tantrum and was only mad because I confronted her about her trying to take control of my car, so I wasn't bothered. But the more I ignored her, the more she thought that meant I was scared of her or that I could not stand up to her. I'm not the kind of person who enjoys confrontations. I dealt with things in my way, and I patiently waited for the day she would drive me to the point where I would take my heavy pound of flesh. That point came when one day I was leaving for the bathroom and she called me a cow. Her friends gasped. They had never reacted to her mean and nasty comments about me, but I guess at that point they genuinely felt she had crossed a line. I ignored it as usual and left for the bathroom. When I got into the bathroom, I heard her telling her friends that the only reason she said that to me was because I told her the previous night that she was too skinny and that I called her a sack of bone. Now, of course, I had never called her or anyone that, but she needed to justify what she had just called me to her friends, so she made the whole thing about me body shaming her up. Her friends were mad that I'd say that about her and started to make comments about my weight. It was hard for me because I've always been that weight, even as a child, and I'd heard too much about my weight since I was a little girl. Just before I got to college, I decided to do something about my weight and lost a few pounds, but I was still a bit bigger, although not nearly as big as I used to be. I decided that it was time to confront her about the lie she told. I walked into the room and confronted her about lying. She insisted that I called her a sack of bones. It was the first time that I'd meet someone who'd lie about me to my face. I was so frustrated that I began to cry. That clearly pleased my roommate. And she continued to lie about how I pretended to be a good person, but would bully her when everyone left. I think her friends knew she was lying, but they just didn't want to get involved. Since that day, my roommate pulled back on the bullying, and I assumed that her friends spoke to her about it after what they witnessed. My chance to get revenge came when my roommate and her friends started planning a group vacation. My roommate had a huge crush on one of the guys in her group, so she was trying very hard to impress him. She also wanted to impress the other girls and make them respect her. That was one thing I knew about my roommate. She was very insecure about how her parents didn't have as much money as her friends. She worked long hours to make money so she could measure up, but even that was never enough. She was very excited about their trip. I'd heard her tell her sister over the phone how she was going to show the other girls up and win the heart of her crush. My roommate started to save money from all the jobs she took to afford the vacation and the clothes she wanted to wear to impress the others in her group. She then bought a pretty suitcase where she saved up all the nice clothes she'd bought for the trip. She was very excited, but so was I. I was going to ruin everything for her. Sometimes I would return from class and catch her trying the dresses on and rehearsing how she would show up on their vacation. One day, two of her friends came in and one of them made an insensitive comment about whether or not my roommate could afford the vacation. As much as she tried to hide the fact that her family didn't have as much money as the rest of them, it was quite obvious that my roommate was struggling. As their departure date drew close, she got more excited and eager to show them a different side to her. 2 days before the departure date, she had already packed up her suitcase. She got on a call with her sister and told her that she made sure to pack earlier so she wouldn't leave anything out, and then she left the room for one of her jobs. After she left, I got to work. I opened her suitcase that she had carefully arranged, took out the fancy designer clothes, and put my ugliest clothes in the suitcase. I'm way bigger than my roommate, so there was no way my clothes would look good on her. Also, my fashion sense was horrible, so there was that. After filling the suitcase with my clothes, I covered it with a blue dress she laced all her clothes with and went about my merry way. On the morning she was to leave, she took her hand luggage and left for the airport with her friends. 7 hours later, I guess they'd gotten settled in the hotel because my roommate was blowing my phone up. When I eventually picked up her call, she was yelling and crying. I heard her friend in the background cursing me out too. I said nothing. I didn't care at all. She called me later and begged me to send her stuff to her, but no way would work. By the time it reached there, they would probably be leaving already. I felt sorry for her, but I felt completely justified in doing that. Anyway, my roommate returned and we became friends. I certainly don't regret doing what I did because she needed to be taught a lesson, and I think the whole thing helped her realize just how hard she worked to impress her rich friends, and how unhealthy that was. With that being said, that's all the time we have for today. If you enjoyed today's video, drop a like and comment below, and if you want to check out our other videos, click the video on the right. With that being said, I'll see you all next time.